All right, last question. It asks us for the zeros. So we're looking to see where does this graph cross the x-axis. So I see 3 times. I see -2, +1, and +2. There aren't any double zeros because it doesn't touch and bounce off the x-axis anywhere. Each of them cross all the way through. For the least degree, remember that we're going to do the number of hills plus the number of valleys, and then you always add 1. So basically I'm looking for maximums and minimums plus 1. So I have a hill here, a valley here, so that's 2, plus 1 would give me 3. This also corresponds to the number of zeros that we have up here. So 2 different ways to do the same thing. For the increasing and decreasing intervals, this is part C, what I'm going to do is draw in a line everywhere there's a max and a min. So that would be like right here, there's a max, and then about right here, there's a min. Okay, so what this does is it divides our graph into intervals. Now, we do need to know the x values. So what I want to do here is put the x values of these points where this crosses through. So all the way to the left is an x value of -infinity. This one here looks like it's at about -1. The minimum looks like maybe 1.5. And then if I follow this all the way to the right, that gets me to +infinity. All right, so now if you imagine that you start on this graph and you're starting all the way to the left, you would be walking up on the graph. So that means this first interval is increasing. I'm going to use a different color, increasing. That means that in between the 2 lines is decreasing, and that it's increasing again. Once you figure out what your first one is, they just alternate. So if the first one's increasing, then it goes decreasing, increasing, and so on. So now for our first interval, which is increasing, it starts at -infinity, and then it stops at this first light blue line, which is at the x value of -1. Now from -1 to the next blue line, which is at 1.5, it's decreasing. So I'm going to say -1 to 1.5 is decreasing. And then my last interval starts at the second blue line at 1.5, and then it stops at infinity, and that's increasing. So I'm going to do 1.5 comma infinity. Now the last thing, it says what quadrant shows a relative maximum of the graph. So I'm looking for not necessarily the highest point on the whole graph, but a hill. Okay, so when it says relative maximum, it's talking about a hill. If it said relative minimum, it would be looking for a valley. So since I'm looking for a hill, that means I'm looking at this thing right here, and that red dot is in quadrant 2. Remember that the quadrants go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the answer would be quadrant 2.